We're delighted to be joined by our next two guests. We're going to be talking about Russian election interference. And our guests are Keir Giles, who's an expert on the Russian military, and Professor Aleksandra Przegalinska, who's an AI expert and Vice President at Kozminski University. Welcome to both of you.
So the Microsoft Threat Analysis Center has basically proven that Russian trolls have awakened and they are going to try to influence the American presidential elections. And in this report, we read that AI-enhanced content is more influential than fully AI-generated content, and also AI audio is more impactful than AI video. So therefore, I want to ask Professor Przegalinska whether we have already learned to distinguish truth from this AI-enhanced reality, or will AI, in fact, have some impact on the outcome of a presidential election in the US?
Well, I think, the situation is extremely complicated because artificial intelligence is clearly booming, and you can now clone voices with the use of AI. You can generate text with the use of AI, do it very quickly, efficiently, and essentially with no barriers. Anybody can do it. You don't need to code for that. So clearly, it is very easy also to manipulate various audiences and spread disinformation also using this technology. Last year, some people were afraid that AI will become conscious, but in fact, the biggest threat is really a threat of manipulation. And it is also true that, content that is purely generated with artificial intelligence is to some extent recognizable, but content that is only edited by humans, but also code-generated with the use of AI, so mixed form, is actually very, very hard to dissect and very hard to classify. So I think we just have to be sort of naturally vaccinated to that, be aware that this type of content can be spreading, and that is currently the only barrier, because also there are no regulations really that would prevent it from happening.
That's it, really quite concerning. Keir, if I can come to you. Now, this is nothing new, is it? Russia has been trying to influence elections in the US and other countries around the world. Let's go back a little bit. Historically, how effective have they been? Or can't we tell?
Well, sometimes it's hard to tell because the authorities don't actually look into it in any given country. In my country, in the UK, there's still an open question about the extent to which Russian interference in the democratic processes influenced the vote on Brexit, for example, because the government of the day and the intelligence and security services chose not to look into it. But there are other instances in which you can see very clearly just how Russian disinformation campaigns and malign influence campaigns have influenced political processes. If you look, for example, at what's playing out at the moment in the US Congress with the vote on aid to Ukraine and the way in which certain Republican candidates are insisting on amendments to that vote, which are actually directly parroting very clearly disproven Russian disinformation, word for word, you can see how this does have an impact because it feeds directly into political processes in the target country. And what Microsoft has noticed is the spooling up of a campaign. This is, of course, a process. It's an ongoing situation rather than something that's always linked to specific political events. But they're noticing this intensification of the efforts by Russia as in the lead up to the next presidential election in the US, which, of course, is expected, but it's building on a foundation that's already in place of a large number of people who do believe in this disinformation.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'll ask again Professor Przegalinska about the AI, because there's something I'm not sure about. We've been talking about Russia trying to influence the outcome of presidential election in the US, but it's not just Russia. It's, Microsoft noted also China and Iran, and I'm wondering which of those three are the best in using AI, because, you can surely muster your skills in such a deception.
Well, I think this is, for me, very hard to tell, but I can say this. Any person can now try and disrupt elections with the use of artificial intelligence. It doesn't have to be any country, nation, doesn't have to be any type of consolidated effort. Recently, what we have seen is the use of actually a Polish technology for voice cloning called 11 Labs to clone the voice of President Biden and then create a deep fake of his that would call people and persuade them not to vote for President Biden. It was not some sort of effort of any country, really. It was just a form of a prank. But I think it should tell us very clearly that, a way to distort elections, any public process, can now happen just because somebody feels like doing it. It doesn't have to be really well coordinated. So that way, I think we do need regulations. We need more transparency when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence. And we also need, like I said before, a lot of awareness, because we can be manipulated by various, countries that want to somehow interfere the process of elections, but we can also be manipulated by just some community of group of people with malicious goals, and that is it. And I think this is something to be mindful of. We cannot just simply believe what we see and scroll mindlessly social media. Instead, we have to brace ourselves for a future where deep fakes are going to be common, and we will need a way to dissect them from reality somehow, maybe with the help of technological platforms.
Sure, but time is the essence here. I mean, if you release such a deep fake, or not that deep fake, right before the election take place, it will be very hard to for the voters to determine whether it was fake news or not, right?
That's the responsibility of social media. Social media should have, like they have like buttons and all types of other engaging buttons, they should have a button that allows you to verify what you see. That's their obligation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that is actually quite, again, very concerning and fascinating. I'd like to turn the picture around a little bit. And Keir, I'll ask you this. Now, clearly, this is, Russian disinformation, Chinese disinformation, and so on, is something we're quite accustomed to. What about the other way around? One gets the impression that they don't suffer from the same risk, the same malady. Is that true? Or, have they found some way to protect themselves against this?
Absolutely, they have, because in the case of Russia and China, they recognized the power of disinformation and malign influence delivered across the internet much earlier than Western countries did. So from the very early days of President Putin arriving in office more than 20 years ago, one of his key priorities was information security of Russia, by which he meant closing off the country to influence from abroad. Because Russia's authorities have always seen news and opinions and ideas coming from outside the country as a key threat to the stability of the regime, because it is a regime that is based on lies and oppression and ignorance. And that's the reason why, for example, throughout history, some Tsars have completely banned the import and possession of foreign books because they are so dangerous. The modern equivalent of that is looking at the vulnerabilities through which foreign countries could actually deliver information to Russia's subjects and trying successfully to close them off. It's not quite the same as the Great Firewall of China, where there's a solid block on information coming in from overseas, but it's a series of soft filters, which makes it quite hard for anybody that wants to reach Russian citizens to actually deliver information to them.
Right, Keir. Now, the disinformation campaign or fake news campaign, or whatever you call it, they concentrate now on presidential election in the U.S. But is there a common pattern for all this fake news? Like, all of them are promoting somehow Donald Trump over Joe Biden, or yeah.
Yeah, Professor Przegalinska has already spoken about the accessibility of these tools and the way it's not just nation states with huge budgets that can actually mount these campaigns because it's been democratized. Unfortunately, that's not the only toxic effect of all of this stuff becoming more available, because domestic political actors too have learned from the success of disinformation operations that have been mounted primarily by Russia, but also by China and Iran, and are actually using those techniques on their own political system. So they're eroding corrupting the system from within and eroding democratic integrity and people's faith in elections and democratic processes as well, simply by adopting all of these techniques of fake news, disinformation, and malign influence. And that is absolutely pernicious for the integrity of democratic processes, not just in the United States, but really across the West.
Professor, if I may ask you now, clearly, I mean, you were talking about the American congressman using Russian disinformation, word for word. Now, how influential is this on the human psyche? And how is it done? I mean, one likes to think that one's fairly balanced and knows when information is wrong or manipulative. But it seems to be working. What is it about us that makes us so vulnerable?
Well, I think it's extremely complex, in fact, but to sort of explain. But one thing that is clear is that technology has been accelerating and can build very realistic images and videos now, right? So it can offer very realistic videos and images, whereas 5 or 3 years ago, those deepfakes were fairly clunky. Today, they're very realistic. So really, when they're well edited and put in the proper context, they can be extremely persuasive, I think. And therefore, we just have to look more carefully into how they are plotted in other things that we see. I remember a year or two ago, there was an attempt to create a deepfake of President Zelensky from Ukraine. And that deepfake stated that Ukraine surrenders. But there was no other information really confirming it. And therefore, that deepfake was obviously very clearly detected as a deepfake. It was not sort of within the continuum of information. And that, I think, was the only thing that was helpful because it was already very well done. So I do think, honestly, that technically the only weapon against AI is also AI. So the way to detect deepfakes that are extremely well done today is only through actually putting them in another system that will assess their accuracy. So it's AI against AI, and I don't see any other way to do it well.
To attack AI with AI. I like it.
Absolutely, yeah. Fight fire with fire.
Precisely. Professor Aleksandra Przegalinska, Vice President of Kozminski University, and Keir, Giles, author and expert on the Russian military, are our guests tonight. Thank you.
Thank you both.